You ever have one of those days where you just know deep in your gut that everything is about to change? Not for the better. Not some grand adventure. I'm talking about the kind of change that feels like a door slamming shut across the entire galaxy. For us, for humanity, that day wasn't marked by a war or a supernova. It was marked by a document. A transmission. They called it the Galactic Edict of Contempt. And they meant every word. See, we'd been the new kids on the block for about a century. We'd clawed our way out to the stars, met the neighbors, and well, they were unimpressed. To them, we were loud, messy, emotional. We were primitive. We felt too much, we fought too hard, we loved too fiercely. They saw our history, all our wars, our art, our chaos, and they didn't see resilience. They saw a flaw. A design error in an otherwise orderly universe. So they put us on probation. 100 years of being watched, judged, and found wanting. We tried. Stars, did we try? We followed their rules, their protocols. We bit our tongues when their diplomats looked at a Michelangelo and asked about its structural efficiency. We held our tempers when they explained that our concept of family was a biological inefficiency. We were on our best behavior, hoping to earn our place. The edict was their answer. I remember the day it hit every news feed on Earth. I was in a comms hub watching the data stream in. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was worse. War means you're a threat. This was an eviction notice. A final, galactic scale judgment. The preamble was just a list of our failures. Every conflict, every mistake, every stumble in our history was laid out not as a lesson but as evidence. Proof of a fundamental incorrigibility. They said our emotions were a dangerous contagion. Our ambition a virus. Our stubborn, stupid, beautiful hope, they called it a neurological disorder. And the ruling was simple. We were to be quarantined. Indefinitely. No more starflight. No more contact. They were going to build a barrier around our entire solar system. A Dyson net, they called it, and just shut us in. We were to be left alone to either evolve into a rational species, or more likely just fade away in our own little cosmic cage. The ultimate timeout. The silence on Earth that night, it wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of a gut punch. It was the sound of a billion hearts breaking at once. The hope of a species extinguished. But here's the thing they never understood. The flaw in their perfect, logical assessment. You don't tell a child they're worthless and expect them to agree. You tell humanity it's condemned for being too human, and you ignite something. Something old and dark and stubborn. That's where our story really begins. Not with the edict, but with the silence that came after. The quiet, desperate scheming in hidden places. See, we had 100 years to study them too. We knew their rules. We knew their perfect, logical systems. And we knew that logic has one huge, glaring weakness. It can't plan for the illogical. I wasn't a soldier. I was a linguist. My job was to find the poetry in their cold, mathematical language. And I found something else. A backdoor. A ghost in the machine of their flawless networks. A single, tiny, irrational oversight. There's a team. A handful of men and women who should never have been in the same room together. A disgraced pilot who flies by instinct, not calculation. A biologist who thinks cheating evolution is a fun weekend hobby. An engineer who talks to machines like they're old friends. And me, the linguist, who found the one word in their entire vocabulary that translates to sorry. We're not an army. We're a diagnosis. We're the living, breathing embodiment of everything their edict condemned. And we've got one shot. One insane, stupid, glorious plan to break into the most secure communication hub in the galaxy. Not to fight them, not to blow anything up. But to send a message. A single, simple human message back to the ones who wrote us off. The hub is called the Arbiter's Crown. It's the place from which the edict was broadcast. And right now, our little patched-together ship, held together with hope and desperation, is drifting right into its sensor shadow. The pilot is breathing so slow I can barely hear it. The engineer is whispering to the thrusters, begging them to run quiet just for a few more minutes. We can see it on the scopes. The crown. It's beautiful. And utterly silent. According to their perfect logic, no one would be stupid enough to try this. No one would be so emotional, so irrational, so contemptible as to fly right into the heart of the power that just sentenced them to oblivion. Their logic is about to meet our desperation. The docking clamp is going to be the hardest part. One wrong move, one hiccup in the ancient code we stole, and their security systems will tear us into atoms so small they'll never even find the dust. All right. Deep breath. The pilot's hands are hovering over the controls. My finger is on the transmit button, ready to feed the fake clearance codes I stitched together from old love poems and war declarations. Words they think are useless. Here we go. For everyone back home, staring up at a sky they're about to lose forever. The ship shudders. A light on the panel flashes from red to amber, and just holds there. Not green. Not red. Amber. Waiting. What happens next? Well, that all depends on whether they understand one thing. That sometimes contempt is just fear in a really fancy suit. And we've given them everything to be afraid of. The light is still amber. Nobody move. Nobody even breathe. The amber light burned in the dim cockpit, a tiny star of pure tension. It wasn't a no. It wasn't a yes. It was a question. A raised, perfectly sculpted alien eyebrow. The kind of delay that wasn't in the manuals I'd deciphered. This was something else. A live operator? A new security protocol? A system just thinking? In the pilot seat, the man we called Jinx let out a breath that was more of a shudder. His hands, usually so steady they could perform surgery on a firing pin, were hovering millimeters from the controls, trembling with the effort of not moving. "Come on, you beautiful, heartless piece of junk," he whispered, not to our ship but to the station. "Just say hello." Behind him, the engineer, Ria, had her eyes screwed shut. She wasn't looking at the panel. She was listening. Her head was cocked, one hand pressed against the cold bulkhead as if feeling for a heartbeat. "She's humming," Ria murmured, her voice barely a breath. A low C. Almost a purr. That's not a rejection tone. That's a query. A query for what? I asked, my own voice tight. My palm was slick with sweat against the console, the stolen codes burning in my mind. They were a fragile thing, those codes. I hadn't just translated them, I'd Frankensteined them. I'd taken the cold, formal syntax of a Vexian agricultural report and spliced it with the rhythmic, emotional pulse of a pre-spaceflight human sonnet. The logic was sound, but the soul of it was human. It was a lie dressed in truth's clothing, and for a species that valued pure, unadulterated data, it might have been the most offensive thing we'd ever done. "It's asking for a clarification on the priority tag," Ria said, her eyes still closed, translating the station's hums and whirs into a language only she understood. "It's confused. The code says we're a Level 3 botanical survey vessel, but our energy signature is messy, fluctuating. It reads like a nervous system." Of course it did. Our ship, the Stubborn Hope, was a patchwork quilt of stolen tech and human ingenuity. Its engine was from a decommissioned Martian freighter, its life support was Vexian surplus, probably stolen itself, and half the wiring looked like it had been chewed by mechanical rats. It didn't have the serene, constant hum of their perfect ships. It had a heartbeat. A scared, galloping, very human heartbeat. "Give it more of the sonnet," the biologist, Kalen, said from the shadows. He was a thin, intense man who looked like he'd rather be talking to a fungus than people. The part about fearful trills. The emotional volatility might register as a known biological contaminant scan. It could sell the botanical survey lie. I nodded, my fingers flying across the interface. I called up the string of code that corresponded to the poet's description of a nightingale's song, a frantic, beautiful, illogical burst of feeling, and appended it to our transmission. We were essentially telling the galaxy's most advanced security system that our engine was spiking because we were excited about some new space flowers. We sent it. The amber light held. 5 seconds. 10. Jinx's knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of his seat. "If they blow us out of the sky, I just want it on record that this was a stupid, beautiful idea." And then, with a soft, almost apologetic chime, the light flickered to a steady, brilliant green. A collective, ragged gasp filled the cockpit. We'd done it. We just talked our way into the lion's den using poetry. "Docking clamps secured," Ria said, her eyes snapping open, a wild, disbelieving grin spreading across her face. "We're in." She thinks we're harmless. The airlock cycled with a hushed, foreign sigh, nothing like the grinding clang of our own ship. The air that washed over us was cold, sterile, and smelled of nothing. Not recycled oxygen, not metal, not life. It was the smell of absolute purity. It was the smell of them. Stepping onto the deck of the Arbiter's Crown was like stepping into a prayer. The corridors were vast, sweeping curves of pearlescent white, lit from within the very walls. There were no sharp angles, no corners where shadow or doubt could hide. It was silent. Not the silence of emptiness, but the heavy, watchful silence of a place that was profoundly, intelligently awake. Our footsteps, even in our soft-soled boots, felt like a violation. This was the heart of the civilization that had judged us. This cold, perfect beauty was what they valued. It made the edict make a terrible, chilling sense. We weren't just different, we were an affront to all. This. Remember the plan, Kalen whispered, his voice swallowed by the immense quiet. Straight to the central data spire. No detours. We are a ripple. We are nothing. We moved like ghosts, hugging the sweeping walls. The maps I'd reconstructed from fragmented data were accurate, but they couldn't capture the scale, the feeling of being an insect crawling through a cathedral. We passed doorways that irised open and shut without a sound, revealing glimpses of vast, empty chambers where light danced in complex, logical patterns for no audience. The place felt less like a station and more like a mind. A vast, sleeping mind we were tiptoeing through. We rounded a corner and there it was. The central data spire. It wasn't a room with a terminal, it was a cylindrical chasm that plunged up and down through the core of the station. In the center, suspended in a beam of coherent light, hung a constantly shifting, shimmering knot of energy, the live data stream of the Galactic network. The words of the edict had been born here. The judgment on humanity was being broadcast from this beautiful, terrible thing. And standing between us and the access terminal on the far wall were two of them. Vexians. I'd only ever seen them on screens. In person they were more. Taller, paler, more serene. Their features were elegantly androgynous, their large, dark eyes reflecting the data stream like pools of still water. They wore simple gray robes that seemed to absorb the light. They weren't guards. They didn't carry weapons. They were attendants, curators. Their mere presence was a barrier. They represented an order we could barely comprehend. One of them turned its head. Not with a jerk, but with a smooth, unhurried motion. Those depthless eyes settled on us. My blood turned to ice. This was it. The flaw in the plan. We'd accounted for automated systems, for logic and code. We hadn't accounted for the living, breathing will behind it. It glided towards us, its movement utterly silent. It stopped a few feet away looking down at us. There was no hostility in its face. No curiosity either. Just a calm, placid assessment, like a gardener noticing an unexpected insect. It spoke. Its voice was melodic, a series of soft chimes and tones that formed their language. My implants scrambled to translate, overlaying a flat electronic voice in my ear. Query, designation. This conduit is designated for Tier 1 communications traffic. Your vessel's manifest indicates botanical survey. Clarify discrepancy. It was so polite. So reasonable. The absolute opposite of the panic screaming through my veins. I was the linguist. This was my moment. I had to speak. I had to lie with a perfect, logical reason for our illogical presence. I opened my mouth but nothing came out. The words I'd prepared evaporated. All I could think of was the edict. The cold, contemptuous listing of our flaws. This being, this perfect, logical creature, was the embodiment of that judgment. How could I possibly deceive it? Then Kalen stepped forward. He didn't look at the Vexian. He was staring, fixated, at a small, almost invisible port on the wall behind it. His biologist's curiosity had overridden his fear. Fascinating, he breathed, his voice loud in the holy silence. Is that a tertiary filtration intake for the data core cooling system? I've only seen schematics. The efficiency must be remarkable. The Vexian's head tilted a fraction of a degree. The human emotion it was being presented with wasn't fear or aggression. It was academic admiration. It was a variable its logic didn't immediately reject. Affirmative, the translated voice chimed in my ear. The system maintains core temperature within a 0.03 degree variance. It is a perfected design. Perfected. Kalen said, a hint of genuine scientific challenge in his tone. It was a crazy, insane gamble. He was arguing with a god in its temple. But the schematic I saw showed a potential for particulate buildup in the resonator array. A theoretical loss of 0.5% efficiency over a standard decade. Has that been resolved? The second Vexian now glided over. A debate. A question of perfect function. This was a language they understood. While they focused on Kalen, Jinx and Rhea began to inch, millimeter by millimeter, along the wall toward the access terminal. I stood frozen, watching the impossible conversation. Kalen, with his messy human hair and his two bright eyes, was holding two masters of the universe in a conversation about coolant filters. He was weaponizing his own obsession. The resonator array was recalibrated in the last cycle, the second Vexian stated. The particulate theory was based on flawed predictive models. The design is flawless. Flawless, Kalen repeated, and I heard it, the the slightest, most human hint of a smile in his voice. It wasn't an agreement. It was a scientist hearing a claim that begged to be tested. Jinx had reached the terminal. He pulled a slender data spike from his sleeve. Rhea had her hand on the wall again, her eyes closed, listening for any change in the station's hum, any shift that might indicate we'd tripped an unseen alarm. This was it. The moment. Jinx glanced at me, a question in his eyes. We were here to send a message. But what message? We talked about it in the abstract. Something to show them we weren't what they thought. Something to make them feel a fraction of the fear they'd given us. But looking at them, so calm, so certain in their flawless, frozen perfection, a new, terrifying thought crashed over me. What if our message wasn't enough? What if one illogical burst of human emotion was just a blip on their endless, serene stream of data? A curiosity to be logged and filed away? Jinx saw the hesitation on my face. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of his head. Asterisk, we're here. We do it, asterisk. He pressed the spike into the terminal. The effect was instantaneous. The beautiful, shifting knot of light in the center of the spire flickered. A jagged, ugly bolt of static like a crack of lightning tore through it. The station's gentle, constant hum dipped, stuttered, and then rose into a sharp, questioning whine. The two Vexians turned from Kalen as one. Their serene composure broke for a microsecond. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was confusion. The profound, system-level shock of the impossible. A flaw. In their flawless system. Alarms didn't blare. Instead, the very light of the corridor began to pulse in a slow, rhythmic, crimson wave. It was a silent, visual siren. A beautiful, terrifying emergency. Asterisk, containment breach. Unauthorized data intrusion. Identify source. Asterisk, a new voice, synthesized and devoid of all melody, echoed through the spire. The Vexians were looking at us now. Really looking. And in those vast, dark eyes for the first time I saw something new. Not contempt. Not yet. It was the dawning, incomprehensible realization that the insect wasn't just an insect. And it had just bitten them. The pulsing red light washed over their pale faces. We were trapped in the heart of their power, with the evidence of our crime shining all around us. The station was awake now. And it was looking right at us. The two tall, gray figures began to glide toward us, not with speed, but with an awful, inevitable purpose. The exit was behind them. The way back to our ship was blocked. Jinx pulled the data spike free. It was done. The message was sent, screaming into the galactic network on a frequency I'd ripped from a Vexian lullaby. But now we had to face the consequences. We had to get out. And the only way out was through them. The pulsing crimson light was like a heartbeat made visible, a raw, angry throb in the pearlescent perfection of the spire. It painted the two advancing Vexians in shades of blood and shadow, stripping them of their serene grace. They were no longer curators. They were instruments. And we were the flaw they had been designed to correct. They didn't run. They didn't need to. Their glide was deceptively fast, closing the distance with that awful, silent purpose. There was no malice in their faces, only a cold, operational intent. We were an error in the system. We were to be deleted. My own heart was a frantic, trapped bird slamming against my ribs. This was it. The brilliant plan. Die in a beautiful room for a message that might never be heard. The conduit. Rhea yelled over the rising whine of the station's alarm hum. She wasn't pointing at the Vexians but at a grill on the floor near the wall, an access point for the very cooling system Kalen had been so fascinated by. It's a tight fit but it leads down. Away from them. Jinx didn't hesitate. While the rest of us were frozen by the advancing figures, he moved. He dropped to his knees, jammed his fingers into the fine grill, and with a raw grunt of effort, ripped it clear from its housing. The sound of tearing metal was a vulgar, shocking noise in the chamber. It was the most human sound I'd ever heard. Go, 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 he barked, waving us forward. Kalen went first, sliding into the dark hole with the unthinking agility of someone who'd spent a lifetime chasing specimens into burrows. Rhea followed. I stumbled forward, my legs feeling like water. I glanced back. The Vexians were almost upon us, their hands reaching out. Their fingers were long, too long, and tipped with something that glinted sharply in the strobing light. I practically fell into the hole. It was a tight, vertical shaft, cold metal rushing past me. I dropped maybe 10 feet before landing awkwardly on a narrow catwalk in blinding darkness. A second later, Jinx landed beside me with a heavy thud, the stolen grill clattering down after him. Above, the opening was framed by the pulsing red light. A silhouette appeared, blocking it. One of the Vexians was looking down at us. It didn't shout. It didn't threaten. It just observed. And then it was gone. They're not coming down, I gasped, my breath coming in ragged pants. Why aren't they coming down? Because they don't have to, Ria said, her voice hollow. She was pressed against the wall, her eyes wide. Listen. The gentle hum of the station had changed. It was deeper now. A vibrational thrum that climbed up through the metal and into our bones. It was the sound of something massive powering up. Something shifting. They're rerouting the environmentals, she whispered. They're going to purge this deck. They'll flood these passages with suppressant gas, or just vacuum the oxygen right out. They don't need to get their hands dirty. The station itself will erase us. The reality of it crushed down on me. We weren't in a fight. We were a spill being cleaned up by an automated janitor. Our struggle, our fear, our desperate heartbeat of a plan, it was all just a minor logistical issue for the flawless, logical mind of the Arbiter's crown. Then we don't stay here, Jinx said, his voice hard. He'd pulled a small palm light from his belt, its beam cutting a shaky path through the oppressive dark. The light revealed a narrow service tunnel stretching out in both directions, a tangled mess of pipes and conduits buzzing with energy. Ria, which way? Talk to her. What's she saying? Ria placed both hands on a large, warm pipe, closing her eyes. She was pale, trembling. She's scared. The station. The order to purge is causing system-wide stress. The vibrations, it's like a panic attack. This isn't a normal function. It's a trauma. She opened her eyes, a flicker of something like pity in them. She doesn't want to do this. Left, Kalen said abruptly, pointing. The airflow is coming from the left. Faint, but it's there. If they're cycling the atmosphere for a purge, the intake might be our only chance. A safe room, a filter chamber, something. We ran. The tunnel was a nightmare of low-hanging cables and searingly hot pipes. We had to hunch over, our progress a clumsy, desperate scramble. The thrumming was getting louder, a pressure building in my ears. Somewhere far away, I heard a deep thunk followed by a hiss that was getting steadily closer. They'd started. Jinx, in the lead, skidded to a halt. The tunnel ended at a solid wall, broken only by a circular vent cover. Dead end. It's not a dead end, it's a door, Ria said, pushing past him. She ran her fingers around the edge of the vent. It's an old maintenance shunt. Manual override. Probably hasn't been used in centuries. She pulled a multi-tool from her hip, her hands a blur as she worked at the rusted bolts. They'd have forgotten it was even here. Flawless logic doesn't account for obsolete hardware. The hissing was closer now. A thin, white mist began to curl around our ankles, cold as the void. It wasn't gas. It was the air itself being sucked away, the moisture in it freezing as the pressure dropped. Ria, Jinx said, his voice tight with warning. I know, she snapped, sweat beading on her forehead. One bolt gave way with a shriek of protesting metal. Then another. The mist was at our knees now. My head was starting to feel light, fuzzy. The air was getting thin. Kalen was leaning against the wall, breathing in short, sharp gasps. The last bolt came free. Jinx grabbed the cover and pulled. It didn't move. He braced a foot against the wall and pulled again, every muscle in his neck corded with the strain. With a final, grating shriek, it gave way, swinging open into another pitch-black space. Jinx practically threw Kalen through the opening, then me. Ria dove after us. He followed, just as the rolling bank of freezing mist filled the tunnel behind him, swallowing the world we'd just left. He slammed the vent cover shut, the sound echoing in the new darkness. We lay there for a moment in a heap, coughing, sucking in deep, blessedly thick breaths of air. We were safe. For now. Jinx's light flickered around. We were in another conduit, but this one was different. Older. Dusty. The pipes here were a different design, less integrated. This was a part of the station's skeleton, a piece of its history they'd sealed off and forgotten. And then the light caught something on the wall. Not a terminal. Not a control panel. A mark. It was a handprint, etched into the dust on a curved metal surface. But it was all wrong. It had 5 fingers like ours, but they were too long, the palm too narrow. It was alien but not Vexian. I'd never seen its like. And below it, scrawled in the same dust, was a series of sharp, angular characters. A language that was nothing like the flowing elegance of Vexian script. It was harsh. Desperate. What is this? I whispered, my skin crawling. This isn't them. Kalen leaned in, his biologist's eyes analyzing. The dust settlement, it's old. Decades at least. This was made long before we got here. Ria placed a hand near the print. The station, she's quiet here. Set. This is a memory she's locked away. Jinx's light followed the markings. They led down the conduit, a trail of frantic ancient graffiti. And then the beam landed on something that made my blood run cold. A skeleton. It was huddled in a recess, wrapped in the tattered remains of a silvery suit that was neither human nor Vexian. One long-fingered hand was curled around a crude, crystalline data chip. This wasn't a Vexian. This was someone else. Someone who had also long ago broken into this place. Someone who had hidden here and died here. We weren't the first to defy the edict. We were just the next. The truth crashed down on me heavier than any station's purge. This wasn't just about humanity. The Vexians' contempt, their perfect, logical order, it had victims we never knew about. We weren't fighting just for our right to exist. We were fighting for everyone who had ever been erased by their cold, flawless judgment. Jinx slowly, reverently pried the data chip from the skeleton's grasp. It was old, its technology unrecognizable. But it was a message from the grave. The hissing had stopped. The purge was over. The station had concluded its cleaning cycle. And then a new sound started. Not a hum. Not a hiss. The slow, deliberate sound of metal footsteps on the other side of the vent cover. Not the silent glide of Vexian attendants. This was the heavy, purposeful tread of something built for one thing only: containment. They hadn't forgotten about us. They just sent in the tools appropriate for the task. The heavy, rhythmic footsteps on the other side of the vent cover were a death knell. Each one was a precise, metallic impact that vibrated through the floor and up into our teeth. This wasn't the silent, graceful approach of the Vexians. This was something built. Something designed for a single, brutal purpose. Containment. Enforcement. The physical manifestation of galactic law. Jinx killed his palmlight, plunging us into an absolute, suffocating blackness. The only sound was our own ragged breathing and that awful, methodical tread. It stopped right outside our makeshift door. None of us moved. We didn't even dare to breathe. I could feel the cold sweat tracing a path down my spine. In the dark, my imagination painted pictures of what was on the other side. A sleek, armored shell. Weapons that didn't fire projectiles but simply erased matter. A perfect, logical machine to correct the imperfect, illogical problem of us. A thin, brilliant blue laser line suddenly sliced through the darkness, scanning across the vent cover from the other side. It traced the edges, looking for weaknesses, for data. It was mapping us. Then a voice. It was synthesized, but unlike the flat tone of the station's alert system. This one was layered, complex, and utterly cold. It was the voice of the law itself, without mercy or malice. It spoke in perfect, unaccented English. They knew exactly what we were. Identify yourselves pursuant to Galactic Edict 7.4.1, Section Alpha. Contain species. You are in violation of quarantine protocol and have committed acts of sabotage against a core communication hub. Surrender is your only logical recourse. The words hung in the dark, heavy and final. They weren't a threat. They were a statement of fact. Our fate was already a line item in their legal code. Jinx's hand found my arm in the darkness, his grip vice-tight. It wasn't fear. It was a signal. Don't move. Don't speak. The thing on the other side of the door waited a perfect 5-second interval. When we didn't respond, it continued, its tone unchanged. Non-compliance noted. Authorization for pacification confirmed. A high-pitched whine began to build, emanating from the other side of the metal. The vent cover started to glow a faint cherry red around its edges. They weren't going to open it. They were going to melt their way through. Pacification, Ria breathed the word, a terrified sigh. She knew what that meant. Not death. Something worse. Neural rewriting. Being turned into empty, placid shells, perfect examples of the corrected humanity they wanted to prove we could become. A living testament to their victory. We were trapped. Behind us was a dead end and the bones of a forgotten being. In front of us was a door turning into molten slag and the end of everything we were. My hand, trembling, brushed against the dusty wall, and my fingers closed around the ancient data chip we'd taken from the skeleton. It was cool and rough against my skin. A last message from another soul who had fought this same Cold War and lost. It was a crazy, stupid, desperate idea. The only kind we had left. As the center of the vent cover began to bubble and drip, painting the darkness with sizzling drops of metal, I fumbled for the port on my own wrist comp. It was designed for modern chips, for human and Vexian tech. This thing was ancient, alien. It would never fit. Jinx, your tool, I hissed, my voice barely audible over the growing whine. The universal reader. The probe attachment. He understood instantly. As the molten hole grew large enough to see a single unblinking red optic lens staring through at us, he shoved the slender, needle-like probe into my hand. I ignored the heat radiating from the door, ignored the thing that was almost through, and stabbed the probe into the core of the crystalline chip. My wrist comp screen flickered to life, a storm of garbled, corrupted data. Ancient code, incompatible systems. It was useless. But the sound, a screeching, distorted burst of audio erupted from the tiny speaker. It was a voice, cracked and frantic, speaking in that same sharp, angular language we'd seen on the wall. And beneath the distortion, my implant struggled, seizing on a few familiar fragments of structure, trying to translate. Asterisk, 80. Krill Empire Vessel Star Tier. Our appeal to the Galactic Conclave is denied. They call it contempt for their, our existence is a, alt on the Arbiter's crown is our only, hey are not flawless. Their law is a lie. The secret is in the transmission dissolved into a scream of static. The effect on the Enforcer unit was immediate and electrifying. The whining stopped. The red optic lens pulled back from the hole. The synthesized voice returned, but for the first time, it carried a faint, almost imperceptible ripple of processing, of confusion. Asterisk asterisk scanning. Unregistered linguistic pattern. Species designation, krill. Status, extinct. Purged pursuant to Galactic Edict 4.2.9, Contempt for Order. Asterisk asterisk. The words hung in the air, colder than the void outside. Asterisk extinct. Purged. Asterisk the skeleton in the corner wasn't just a failed intruder. It was the last remnant of an entire species. They hadn't just been quarantined like us. They had been erased. Completely. For the same crime. For contempt. And the edict had a number. 4.2.9. It wasn't a unique judgment for humanity. It was a clause. A reusable tool. We were just the latest entry in a long, grim list. The Enforcer's voice returned, harder now. Asterisk asterisk this data is a historical contaminant. Its existence is a violation. You will surrender the source immediately. Asterisk asterisk. But the moment of confusion had given us a heartbeat. A single, crucial flaw in their perfect execution. Jinx didn't waste it. Kalen. The pipe behind you. The big one. Is it what I think it is? Kalen, shaking, ran his hands over the large, warm pipe we were crouched next to. Primary coolant runoff, for the data spire. It's superconducted, barely insulated. If we rupture it, we don't blow ourselves up, Jinx finished, a wild, reckless light in his eyes even in the dark. We give the station a migraine. A big one. While the Enforcer began to cut again, its beam focused on the lock mechanism now, Jinx and Rhea attacked the pipe with their tools. They weren't trying to break it open. They were jury-rigging a connection, using cables from their packs, splicing into the pipe's flow. What are you doing? I asked, my voice a mixture of terror and awe. Redirecting the purge. Rhea grunted, her hands a blur. The station tried to vacuum this section? We're gonna give it something to vacuum. We're gonna flood the entire security subnet with raw hypercooled plasma. It'll cause a cascade failure. It'll think it's having a stroke. It was the most insane, brilliant human plan imaginable. We weren't fighting their weapons with weapons. We were fighting their perfect system with a plumbing problem. With a final spark and a surge of heat, they connected the last cable. Jinx looked at us, his face grim. This is gonna get loud. And cold. When I give the signal, we go back out the way we came. We run for the hope. No looking back. He held up a hand, counting down with his fingers. 3. The Enforcer's cutter breached the lock with a sharp crack. 2. The vent cover began to swing open. 1. Jinx slammed his fist down on a makeshift switch. The world turned inside out. A sound like a dying star screamed from the pipe. A blinding, blue-white torrent of energy erupted from their contraption, not out into our space, but back into the station's own systems, shooting through the cables they'd spliced. The lights in our conduit blew out in a shower of sparks. The Enforcer unit in the doorway staggered, its smooth movements suddenly becoming jerky, glitchy spasms. Its single red eye flickered wildly. Asterisk asterisk system over. Asterisk asterisk. Its voice garbled into distorted nonsense. Alarms blared throughout the station. Real, harsh klaxons, not polite pulsing lights. It was a sound of pure, undignified panic. Now! Jinx yelled. We burst out of the conduit, past the twitching, malfunctioning Enforcer, and into the main service tunnel. The mist was gone, but the air was now filled with the stink of ozone and burning circuits. Emergency lights strobed, casting a chaotic, dizzying dance of shadows. We ran. We didn't look back. The station was shuddering around us, convulsing. Conduits sparked overhead. Doors irised open and shut randomly. We were no longer just saboteurs. We were carriers of a forbidden truth. We knew the edict wasn't just for us. We knew others had fallen. And the guardians of galactic law, the perfect, logical Vexians, had a secret. They had a graveyard in their basement. And we were running through it, trying to escape before they buried us in it too. The stubborn hope was still a world away, and between us and home, every system in the crown was now waking up in pain and looking for the cause. The station was screaming. The beautiful, serene hum of the Arbiter's crown was gone, replaced by a deafening, shuddering wail of pure systemic agony. Blue-white energy arced from shattered conduits overhead, casting our frantic shadows like ghosts on the walls. The air tasted of burnt metal and panic. We'd given the flawless mind a stroke, and it was thrashing in its death throes. We ran, our lungs burning, driven by a terror that was somehow cleaner, sharper than before. We weren't just running from capture anymore. We were running from a collapsing god. Jinx led the way, his instincts as a pilot somehow translating to these twisting, chaotic corridors. He'd duck under a shower of sparks, shove a spasming door aside with a raw shout, and never break stride. Rhea was our compass, her hand constantly skimming the walls, shouting warnings. Left. The right tunnel's buckling. Or, down this shaft now. The heat is rising above us. Kalen and I just ran, our legs pumping, the image of the twitching enforcer and the ancient krill skeleton burned onto the backs of our eyes. We carried the weight of a dead species on our shoulders. Their story was our fuel. We burst into the main docking bay. Our ship, the Stubborn Hope, sat where we'd left her, a scruffy, patchwork angel in a cathedral of chaos. She'd never looked more beautiful. But between us and her open airlock, the bay floor was a cracked and bubbling mess from the energy surge. And standing guard, swaying but still operational, was the second enforcer unit. Its red optic lens was dim, flickering, and one of its arms hung useless by its side, but its other arm was raised, tipped with a weapon that glowed with a soft, deadly light. It was waiting for us. Its last order to contain, overriding its own damage. Asterisk asterisk halt. Asterisk asterisk. The voice was garbled, broken, but the command was unmistakable. We skidded to a stop. There was no way around. The Hope was 50 feet away. It might as well have been 50 light years. Jinx stepped in front of us, his hands raised. Okay, he said, his voice surprisingly calm amidst the din. Okay. You got us. The enforcer took a lurching step forward. Its weapon hummed, powering up. This was it. The flawless system, even broken, was about to correct its error. Galactic law, in all its cold, contemptuous glory, was going to win. And then I did the most illogical human thing I could think of. I started to laugh. It wasn't a happy sound. It was a raw, broken, hysterical burst of air that tore from my throat. I laughed at the madness of it all. I laughed at the perfect, beautiful station falling apart around us. I laughed at the absurdity of a giant robot trying to kill us with a universe-sized rulebook. I laughed for the krill who had tried and failed. I laughed for all of humanity, so messy and flawed and stupidly, stubbornly alive. The enforcer stopped. Its flickering lens focused on me. Confusion. My laughter was a variable it could not compute. Its programming knew fear, defiance, aggression. It knew how to pacify them. It had no response for this. What are you doing? Jinx hissed, his eyes wide. I stepped forward, beside him, tears of mad laughter streaming down my face. I held up the ancient krill data chip. You want it? I yelled over the station's death cry. You want your historical contaminant? Come and get it. I drew my arm back and, with every ounce of strength I had, I threw the chip. Not at the enforcer. I threw it in a high, glinting arc over its head, toward the sparking, damaged control panel on the far side of the bay. It was a terrible throw. It was the throw of a scared linguist, not an athlete. The chip clattered against the wall a good 10 feet from the panel and fell to the floor. The enforcer's head swiveled, tracking the chip's trajectory. Its prime directive, secure the contaminant, overrode its secondary directive to pacify us. It turned its back on us and lurched toward the chip. It was the opening. The single, stupid, glorious opening. Go! Jinx roared. We didn't run around it. We ran right past it, a blur of desperate motion. I heard the enforcer's joints whine as it began to turn back, realizing its mistake. Its weapon hummed again, seeking a target. Riao was the first up the ramp. Kalen followed. I was right behind him, my heart hammering against my ribs. I risked a glance back. Jinx wasn't behind me. He was standing his ground at the foot of the ramp, facing the enforcer. He had pulled a heavy industrial wrench from a clip on his leg. It was a pathetic weapon against galactic technology. Jinx! I screamed. The enforcer took aim at the ship, at me in the airlock. It was going to shoot the Hope. Jinx didn't say a word. He just threw the wrench. It spun through the air and smacked right into the enforcer's flickering optic lens with a satisfying crack. The unit staggered. The shot from its weapon went wide, searing a hole in the ceiling. It turned its damaged head toward Jinx, its soul focused now on this new immediate threat. That was all he needed. He turned and sprinted up the ramp. "Punch it, Arya," he bellowed. The airlock door hissed shut just as the enforcer's fist slammed into it with a deafening boom. The whole ship shuddered. We were thrown to the deck as engines we had no right to have flared to life with a throaty, violent roar. Jinx scrambled into the pilot's seat, his hands flying across the controls. "Hang on. This is gonna be ugly." The stubborn Hope lifted, jerky and unsteady. The docking clamps, half melted from the energy surge, tore free with a shriek of metal. We shot forward, straight for the massive bay doors that were already sliding shut, the station trying to seal its wound. We weren't going to make it. The gap was closing too fast. "Brace for impact." Jinx yelled, but he didn't slow down. He poured every ounce of power we had into the forward thrusters. And then, a miracle. A final, catastrophic power surge from the station's core rocked the entire structure. The bay doors, halfway closed, shuddered and jammed. We shot through the narrowing gap with centimeters to spare, the sound of screeching metal echoing as we scraped through. And then we were out. We were in the silent, cold, beautiful black of open space. A cheer erupted in the cockpit, raw and relieved and half-sobbing. We'd done it. We'd broken out of the Arbiter's crown. We were alive. Jinx brought the ship around and we saw it. The crown wasn't just damaged. It was dark. Entire sections were blacked out. It floated, silent and dead, a monument to its own broken perfection. Our message, our stupid human message of defiance, had been sent. And we had lived to tell the tale. The relief was so powerful it was dizzying. We'd won. And then the console in front of me lit up. Not with a Vexian transmission. This was different. A blizzard of signals, hundreds of them, thousands, flooding every frequency. It was a cacophony of voices, all speaking at once in a dozen different languages. Some were digital, some were organic, all were stunned. My implant struggled to translate, picking out fragments, layering them over each other in a chaotic mess. Asterisk. Repeat, the Arbiter's crown is offline. The Contempt Edict broadcast has ceased. Asterisk. Asterisk. Is the Krill remnant, we heard the signal. The Star Tier's last message. The Vexian lie is exposed. Asterisk. By the gods, the humans, they actually did it. Asterisk. Querying all networks, is galactic law still in effect? Who is in authority? Asterisk. The galaxy was in an uproar. We hadn't just sent a message. We'd cut the microphone of the universe's judge. And in the sudden, shocking silence, everyone who had ever been silenced was starting to speak. We stared at each other, the enormity of it sinking in. We hadn't just saved ourselves. We'd shattered the entire system. And then a new signal came through. This one was tight beam, focused and powerful. It overrode the chaos. The screen resolved into a face. It was a Vexian. But not like the attendants. This one was older, its features sharper, its eyes not pools of still water, but chips of obsidian. It wore a mantle of intricate silver threads that seemed to move on their own. And it looked furious. But beneath the fury there was something else. Something that looked an awful lot like fear. It spoke and its translated voice was like ice. Asterisk asterisk human vessel. You believe you have won. You have not won. You have broken a tool. The hand that held it remains. Asterisk asterisk the Edict of Contempt was not our law. It was our assignment. Our duty to a higher authority. The words landed in the silent cockpit like stones. A higher authority? The Vexians, the masters of the galaxy, the cold, perfect judges, were just janitors? Middle management? The Vexian's image leaned closer to the screen, its dark eyes boring into ours. Asterisk asterisk you have not earned your freedom. You have simply graduated to a larger prison. And the warden is now awake. Asterisk asterisk. The transmission cut out. We sat there in the sudden quiet of our ship, the cheers and the joy completely forgotten, frozen in our seats. We looked out at the infinite stars, at the thousands of new voices chattering in celebration on our comms. And for the first time, the universe didn't feel like a home we were fighting to join. It felt like a cage we had just realized we were in. We had beaten the guards. But we had no idea who owned the zoo. The real fight, it seemed, had just begun. The silence in the cockpit was heavier than any we'd experienced in the station's depths. The celebratory chatter from 1,000 species still scrolled across the comm screen, a festival of newfound freedom. But we couldn't hear it anymore. All we could hear was the echo of that Vexian's voice. Asterisk, a larger prison. The warden is now awake. Asterisk. We had fought so hard to break one set of chains, only to find they were connected to a much larger set. The feeling wasn't fear exactly. It was a profound, soul-deep exhaustion. We'd reached the finish line and found out it was just the starting line of a race we never knew we were in. Jinx was the first to move. He let out a long, slow breath, his hands still resting on the controls. He didn't look back at us. He just stared out at the star-dusted blackness. Well, he said, his voice rough. That's a twist I didn't see coming. It was so understated, so perfectly him, that it broke the tension. A weak, shaky laugh escaped my lips. Then Rhea joined in, a sound that was half sob, half relief. Even Kalen offered a thin, stunned smile. We were alive. That was the first thing. We were alive and we were free. The Arbiter's crown hung dead in space behind us, a monument to a battle we'd somehow won. The Edict of Contempt was silent. For now, for everyone out there celebrating, that was enough. What do we do? Rhea asked, her voice small. The question hung in the air. It was the only question that mattered anymore. Jinx finally turned, his face etched with a new kind of weariness. But his eyes, they still had that stubborn glint. We go home, he said simply. We tell them what we saw, what we heard. We show them the data. He nodded toward the console where I'd recorded the final, chilling transmission. And then? Kalen pressed. They will be coming. The warden, whoever, whatever that is. Then we get ready, Jinx said, a hard edge returning to his voice. We're not the new kids anymore. We're the ones who kicked the door in. Everyone out there, he pointed a thumb at the comm screen, they're looking for someone to lead. Might as well be us. It was a terrifying thought. Leading a sci-fi rebellion we didn't understand, against an enemy we couldn't name. But as I looked around the battered cockpit, at the dust from a dead alien still on our clothes, at the determined set of Jinx's jaw, the wild light in Rhea's eyes, the focused intensity on Kalen's face, I understood. This wasn't about being leaders. It was about being a spark. We turned the stubborn hope toward Earth. The journey back was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts, processing the immensity of it all. The joy on the comms was contagious, but it was tempered by our new knowledge. We were the bearers of a darker truth. When we finally broke into Earth's space, the sight that greeted us stole our breath. It wasn't the silent, fearful planet we'd left. The space around it was filled with ships. Not Vexian. Not human. Dozens of different designs, all shapes and sizes, flickering into existence from jump points. Krill ships, angular and fierce-looking. Bulky freighters from species we'd only read about. A whole galaxy of the quiet, the controlled, the contemptuous had suddenly found their voice. And they were all heading for Earth. A hailing frequency chirped, overriding all others. The face that appeared on the screen was insectoid, with multifaceted eyes that glimmered with fierce intelligence. My implant translated its clicking speech. Asterisk, human vessel. We are the remnants of the hive of Cthar. We heard your signal. We felt the crown fall. We have been silent for 10 generations. We are silent no longer. We offer alliance. Asterisk. Another signal cut in. A graceful, bioluminescent being. Asterisk. The Sylvan flow offers alliance. Asterisk. Another. And another. A cascade of voices not just celebrating but pledging. Offering. Asking. They weren't looking for a leader. They were looking for a home. For a place to rally. And they'd chosen us. They'd chosen the messy, emotional, illogical planet that had dared to scream back at the silence. We landed. The story we told wasn't met with despair. It was met with a grim, hardened resolve. We showed them the recording of the Vexian's warning. We told them about the krill skeleton in the ductwork, the final proof that we were not the first, and would not be the last if we failed. The world's leaders, the military strategists, they started planning. They started building. But the real change, the real sci-fi rebellion, wasn't happening in their chambers. It was happening in the docks, in the labs, in the streets. Human engineers were working alongside krill technicians, integrating their fierce weaponry with our stubborn ingenuity. Botanists from the Sylvan Flow were teaching us how to grow food in impossible places, sharing secrets they'd hidden for centuries. That old human spirit, the one the edict had condemned, our collaboration, our passion, our stubborn hope, it wasn't a flaw anymore. It was the glue. It was the engine. I found myself in a new role. Not just a linguist, a translator of more than words. I helped build the new language of this alliance. A language not of cold logic, but of shared history, shared loss, and a shared, defiant hope. We don't know what's coming. The Warden is still out there, a shadow at the edge of known space. The Vexians have gone quiet, licking their wounds and waiting for their masters. But we're not waiting anymore. I sometimes stand on a hill at night and look up at the sky. It's different now. It's not a cold, empty void. It's not a cage. It's a tapestry. Every new star that flickers to life is a ship, a friend, a promise. The silence has been filled, not with the cold judgment of an edict, but with the noisy, chaotic, beautiful sound of us. All of us. We're no longer just humanity. We're the contemptuous, the ones who refuse to be erased. And our sci-fi rebellion is just a new name for a very old, very human story, the story of fighting for the right to be, flaws and all. The edict is over. Our story is just beginning. And just like that, the fate of the galaxy changed. If you want to make sure you don't miss what the Warden does next, well, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. It's the best way to make sure you're here for the next chapter. And if this story of defiance resonated with you, if you felt that spark of rebellion, let me know by leaving a like. It really helps others find these stories. Thanks for watching. Until next time.